3, we'll cut that off. Okay. Where do you see biodiversity being in the next 20 years? I know you talked about how it's decreasing, but like, do you have any specific general hypothesis about where it will be in the next 20 years?
That is a
It's okay if you can't answer this.
that's really an unanswerable question. You know, biodiversity. You have a starting point and you have an end point. Well, there is an end point because it continues for infinity. But if we take a biodiversity of a natural habitat, and human activities has a tendency to decrease the number of species within that habitat or impact it in some way. On the other hand, due to humans' introduction of alien species and invasive species, we find some habitats are becoming much more diverse, biological diversity, but not necessarily in a positive way. When we have invasive species that are introduced into an established, balanced, sustainable ecosystem, and these invasive species upset this balance, change the dynamics, cause species to either move out, die out, or somehow unable to compete as they had before, it changes the dynamics of the ecosystem, sometimes to the point of collapse. But the biodiversity changes. So, you know, it's sort of a double-edged sword. You have, if you leave it alone, you have one kind of biodiversity. With human activity, you have another kind of biodiversity, which in some cases may be detrimental. In fact, in most cases, it's detrimental from a natural point of view. Although we've also taken animals and introduced them to habitats, you know, for human recreational purposes. For instance, we've introduced foreign or alien species of trout into local California lakes for fishing purposes. We've introduced the pheasant that came from India into many farmlands areas for hunting purposes. You know, and by doing so, we've increased the biodiversity, but we've also influenced the dynamics of the natural ecosystems. But in many cases, these are already, say, farmlands or areas that have been impacted in other ways. So, you know, you talk about biodiversity in general terms, it's pretty hard because each ecosystem is unique and specific, and each interference by human activity will vary considerably. So, is it getting better or is it getting worse? All I can say is it's changing. We look at places like Florida that have all of these invasive species down there. Well, even the Back Bay, we have over 500 species of plants down there, but only about 244 are natives, and over 274 are alien and invasive species. And if just let go, they will change the dynamics of the biodiversity. We'll still have it, but it's going to be very different than what nature intended.
I'm going to skip right now to this question because you were talking about recreational activities. I noticed that. In order to preserve biodiversity, do you feel like that more species should be in a facility such as aquarium or zoo to make sure that they do not become extinct, or should they be free in their own habitat? Which one do you support?
Oh my gosh, that is a question that is caused confrontation amongst the experts throughout the world. When an organism is reduced in the natural habitat to a point where it is imminent extinction, yes, I feel we need to reach out, bring these animals into a coveted, protected area, try to maintain their genetic continuity. If we can, do captive breeding, reintroduce them into natural habitats, which have been very successful, not only in this country, but in other countries. But unfortunately, the animals have to be reduced to such a point where this effort is extremely expensive, difficult, long-term, and sometimes not always successful. When I was your age, starting college, I was doing a project on the California condor. At that time, the numbers of condors in California had been reduced down to about 60 species, 60 individuals. By the time I finished my report, that number had dropped down to about 45. And within a couple of years, the number dropped down to less than 20. At that time, the scientist says, we have to do something. And even though there was many people in the Audubon Society and other organizations that were adamantly against it, the California Department of Fish and Game and other wildlife services went out, captured the last few of these birds, brought them into captivity, and over a period of years, through captive breeding, have been able to raise enough to reintroduce them. So they are not the original ones, but the offspring of the original ones that were captured are now flying free. And there are many instances of this working. So, if it ever gets to the point where it is to protect them from extinction, it's an unnecessary, I mean, it's a unpalatable choice, but it's one that I think we need to take these animals in and protect them. And there's been a lot of sci-fi movies also made about seed banks and things of this sort, where we are saving the genetic material of these organisms for sometime in the future when human beings wake up and are ready to allow these organisms to survive again in a natural habitat. We at least have some kind of a seed or DNA source to reintroduce them to what nature had. Well, we don't know if nature had intended 100, 1,000 years later to still be here or not. It's undeniable that human activities have impact on natural systems, and many of these ecosystems and the species within them are negatively impacted. What is the answer for the future, for our activities now and for future activities? Yeah, I don't know.
Suffering.
It's to minimize the impact of the natural environments as much as possible. We can't give up our way of life, but we can change it and make it so that it will have a less negative impact. I also mentioned to you guys too that each one of us is going to have a legacy when we leave this planet, and the fact that we even exist and have schools and buildings and chairs and stuff means we've used a lot of resources. We've taken things away from the world, but we can also give back. And if we can, when we leave this world, if we can look at our balance of impact, positive and negative, and we're balanced out, that would be a net, well, let's see, that would be a net balance. Okay, if we can say after we die that the world is a better place because of our existence, then that's a net gain. And if we have enough people doing that, hopefully it'll balance out those individuals who are more short-sighted and here for the short term, taking what they can.
Okay. How much of an insight has your career given you?
So I'm excited.
The career that I have, the insight that I have.
Yeah, like the insight. Like when you were in high school, you might have thought that maybe, oh, I know about this, I know about what's going on to the animals. How much more of an insight has your career given towards that specific?
Oh
like
gosh,
that?
it is. Yeah, immensely. I took minimal science. I mean, I've always been interested in nature as an individual. I took minimal sciences in high school, and when I got into junior college, I took a lot of sciences because I was just kind of interested in it. It renewed my interest in it. I took plant biology and animal biology and zoology and stuff like that. But when I got into my undergraduate work at Cal State Fullerton, I had my epiphany, I might say. The world opened up to me. I was in the forefront of what we would normally call ecologist. I was taking a couple of graduate classes which looked at, this is before 1970, so you know how long ago it was, looking at what is ecology, what is conservation, what is the environment, what is the impact of human activities on these different ecosystems. And, ecology and conservation were just starting to get out into the public realm. And as I learned these things and I was looking at the big picture and saw how they were kind of integrated to one another, I had been studying to become a research biologist, which is very, very specific and very narrow field. But when I was looking at how the overall picture of the environment and the ecology and conservation, how it works, and how I looked around and understood so many of our people in our society don't understand how it works, how it goes together, how it integrates. And so I said, I need to accept this as my mission, as my goal, to go out and to be a prophet for ecology, for environments. And Since that time, in my teaching career, I've taken multiple classes. I've always had a conservation environmental theme in all of my science classes. I don't care if it was geology or physical science or environmental science or biology or whatever it happened to be. There's always environmental, ecological themes that always carry through. And as I continue working in the marine sciences, I found even a more specific niche where the ocean is probably the greatest influence on human life, but least understood and least appreciated. And so I felt that my mission needs to focus Mayberry on trying to conserve those resources and then enlighten, make people aware of what these resources are and how important they are to us. In my activities in the Back Bay of the last 6 years with classes like yourself has only helped encourage and reinforce those particular feelings. And working with people like yourselves who have a basic understanding, and like I said before, most of our environmental problems come about because, number one, ignorance, which you guys are beyond that point, indifference, which obviously you're not indifferent anymore, you want to do something about it, and it's very encouraging to see young folks like yourself and like the ones we had yesterday come out, take an interest in this, and hopefully incorporate a different attitude, a different mindset about their relationship to the environment, and some of the choices that they will make in the future hopefully will be influenced by some of the things that they've learned while they're in Back Bay.
Okay, when I noticed, okay, we're gonna cut that part off. Okay, when we were on the field trip with you, we were analyzing the biodiversity of the Back Bay, and we grabbed out these animals. We noticed them, we counted them, but there's something else we want to know. Are there any certain procedures, like if you pull these animals out, if you find them like in danger, are there any certain procedures that you do to keep this animal safe from a tainted environment?
Well, what we are doing in the Back Bay with the marine life inventories and with the programs that you guys are is basically doing a monitoring and a precursory survey of what's going on so that we can get an idea if there are some major significant changes. Insidious long-term changes are not going to be that obvious to us because we're not that specific to research. We need to get people from the universities and schools and individuals like yourself who have an intense interest, let's say, in a very specific thing, like, what about brake lining pollutants? What is the effect back there, And, when we can pool this knowledge over a period of time, then we'll have a little better idea of what's going on. What we're doing, basically, we're just kind of monitoring and making a checklist. Yes, it's here this time. No, it's not here this time. When we see an obvious change, a large change like introduction of pollutants and nutrients that can cause a radical change, we're talking real obvious change, then we try to address that. Either we can't do a thing about it personally, but we addressed it through the municipalities where maybe these pollutants are coming from. And we have mitigation programs too. If somebody spills oil in the Back Bay, well, they are required to clean it up, fix it, and make it as good as it was before, if not better. But we still have a lot of political and financial conflict. The Lower Bay, the harbor, is a good example of that. We have a lot of very, very rich people down there with very nice homes and very big boats parked in a harbor that's slowly filling up with silt, and they want to dredge this out, which makes it accessible so their boats can get in and out. But in order to do this, they have to take out a plant which has, by law, been protected. So there's a conflict. The law says you cannot dredge. They say, but I can't get my boat out, and I pay thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes every year. What are my rights? So, see, these are some of the conflicts that we need to recognize and deal with. It's not just black and white. There's an awful lot of gray areas.
So you feel that we're having a conflict with biodiversity right now, and
right.
And you feel that politics and saving the environment are conflicting with each other.
I think that their goals are not always the same. That's true. To maintain the ecosystem, to maintain the biodiversity requires some changes from the human influence and impact. Some of that can be regulated through laws and codes and things of that sort. Some of that is going to have to be accepted by ethical or moral change in people's attitudes. And I think that's probably more wholesome and better in the long run. But biodiversity, you're talking about biodiversity in the Back Bay or just in general?
In general.
In general. It is and will continue to be impacted by human beings because as we continue to grow and develop and want more things, we will go into the natural environments to do that. And